Thanks for joining us at the SBP Podcast, the voice of mobile film. This is episode 35, and I'm your host, Susie Botello. Hey everybody, welcome to the SBP Podcast, the voice of mobile film. I'm here with sponsors from last year's film festival, Neal and Jana Hallford. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, good job. To me. They are their company, their sponsoring company is called Swords and Circuitry. And they're from San Diego, which is wonderful. And one of the things that I want to emphasize in this podcast is how should I say this? Local companies should sponsor local film festivals, especially mobile film festivals, because that's what we are. But I wanted to... Instead of me doing an introduction, I would like to have you guys introduce yourselves. First of all, just a little bit about your background, like movie stars, right? Just a little bit of your backgrounds and how you came to get into this crazy artistic video and film and, industry in the first place.
Well, I've been doing this kind of for a long time, actually. I got into filmmaking when I was 13 years old.
Wow.
And I discovered a magazine called Cinemagic Magazine, which was about doing special effects in particular, but it was about kids using their Super 8 cameras to shoot their own backyard films.
So the Super 8 movie was about you.
It was. It was totally about me, except for the fact that kid had way better friends than I did. Because I was like the only person that was really into it, and everybody else was like, whatever. But that's actually how I got my first kind of footsteps into filmmaking, was working with Super 8 stuff back in the day. And I later went on to college. I went through radio, television, film production at the University of Oklahoma. Of course, I'm being good right now. You can't hear my accent as much because I'm behaving myself. But every once in a while, the Okie can come out, and it's pretty bad sometimes.
Plus, you're an audio personality.
I'm
right?
an audio person, and so I did work in radio for on and off for about 5 years.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know you have to have the Midwest accent for the most
of course,
part.
for a number of years, there was the Mid-Atlantic accent that they have. But Chicago was actually how they trained a lot of the announcers. They wanted everyone to sound like they were from Chicago. And so apparently this was sort of the thing. But you didn't have the really thick, kind of
right.
Chicago accent. But still, that's what they trained for. But anyway, I did 5 years in radio, and then I took this weird tour through working in the computer gaming industry.
Wow, cool.
Which is still primarily sort of my bread and butter, where I make my living. But then we got into independent film, I got into film. So Jana and I did back in 2007.
Wow.
And so you want to kind of talk about us dipping our toe in that particular pool, or?
All right. Well, I just wanted to give a little bit about my background. I was actually a visual art major, so I'm very visually oriented. But like Neal, when I was in college, back then, it was very expensive to go into filmmaking. So I thought it was really interesting visual storytelling, but that was something you needed quite a budget to be able to do. Now, especially in the past 10, 15 years, the technologies have changed. There's been quite a bit of democratization of filmmaking, which is one of the reasons we love sponsoring the film festival. But anyway, something that I really felt very strongly as I was in my college years and being a professional track art major was I really realized how much I loved being around creative people. and decided whatever I did in the future, I wanted to be around creative people and encourage creativity. And so that was something that Neal and I had in common when we met. And so when we had been married about 5 years, we did a book together. He had a book contract to do a book about the creative side of computer games and the storytelling and world building, etc. But right when he got the contract, he also got a work contract, and he was busy creating a game. So I asked if I could help him write the book, because I've done a lot of writing for marketing and for corporations. And one of the things I'm able to do, I discovered, was that if I hear someone speak, I can write as if I am them. So I've been the voice of different CEOs for different companies and all. I've just asked them a few questions about something and then been able to write a column for them. And so anyway, that worked pretty well.
That's a very unique and interesting talent.
For writing for companies, it was a very good one.
Yeah.
It kept me going for a long time. But anyway, so our book together was called Swords and Circuitry, A Designer's Guide to Computer Role-Playing Games. And so that's where our company, that was our first project. We've always helped each other with our creative projects, but that was our first one we were really... officially and definitely a lot of back and forth and interesting discussions about things and stuff. So anyway, as Neal mentioned, as time went by and we discovered what a vibrant local filmmaking community we have in San Diego, we started making connections with people here, and we have a wonderful film community. And then later, when we found out about the Mobile Film Festival, we talked about it, and both have been very enthusiastic about sponsoring, because, as I mentioned, there's been this democratization of filmmaking, and modern-day mobile phones are such a wonderful filmmaking tool, and it was really exciting to see people from around the world submitting wonderful, beautiful things. And so anyway, that's something that we both really enjoyed, because we both appreciate people that encouraged us creatively, and still do, and we want to encourage filmmaking, and so the International Mobile Film Festival is a perfect way to do it.
Yeah, I think that one of the things about the film festival here that Susie had, in some respects, I really kind of felt like we kind of come full circle, because shooting with that old Super 8 camera of mine, a lot of people would say, well, you need to have a big 35 millimeter camera. You have to work in Hollywood. That was the thing that frustrated me.
Don't you love it when people say you have to, you
Yes.
have to, you have to?
Mm-hmm. And I think that was the frustrating thing for me in college, because I assumed if I wanted to make film, I had to go to Hollywood. And the other rule was, well, if you are going to go to Hollywood, you need to know someone that's there. How are you going to get in the door? And I didn't particularly want to go out to Hollywood and work at Burger King in the hopes that I could find some way to get onto a studio set. And so I focused on radio back in the day. But it left me with a permanent sympathy for the people who are the independent creators that are out there, is how can you do this on your own? And then, of course, bang, lo and behold, about 2007, started discovering all these people that are making amazing films with making amazing films with video recorders and everything else, and stuff that looked very much like Hollywood films, and they're doing it on their own on small budgets. And so, and then a few years roll by, and bang, here we've got mobile phones, and a lot of people not necessarily taking them seriously at first. And of course, that's changing. We've got a lot of big name directors that are now making films with mobile phones, and so I'm seeing kind of the same thing happen all over again. And so I have a lot of respect for what Susie's doing with this festival, for all the filmmakers that came out. This last year, this was our first year sponsoring the festival, and I was just amazed by all the creativity and the passion that these people were bringing to their films. So it was a natural for Jana and I both.
Yeah, and the one thing when you were talking about the Super 8 as opposed to the other big film cameras that they were using at the time, I know you were just a kid and everything, but there's a comfort level and a personal storytelling aspect when that happens. You know, when you're holding a camera that's this small, not just behind the camera, but in front of the camera when you have actors, or as they call in the industry, subjects, because not everyone is always acting. It could be, you know, a report or something like that. And that's one of the things I'm starting to really promote, the personalization with the democratization. Do I sound like I'm doing a rap thing here? Of storytelling, because we're all storytellers, right, Jana?
Oh, very much so. And that's something that whatever medium we're working in, we see it as storytelling. And I was just thinking when you were talking about, you know, the two of you were talking about, you know, the evolution of that kind of very personal, low budget filmmaking is right before all of this hit, right around the time Neal and I were starting to get involved in the local filmmaking community. You started to see large, expensive Hollywood productions that were trying to look like found video footage or like somebody's shaky cam running from the monster type stuff. And so it's funny how the two areas have sort of crossed, you know, where you have some things that can be done, you know, with a 35 millimeter camera or a phone that can be just as beautiful as anything, you know, that came out of a larger studio. And then you can also have larger studios trying hard to look like a homemade film. So I've just kind of enjoyed that visually, seeing that happen, and the little joys of irony and ironies of that situation.
Yeah, I was particularly proud back whenever Paranormal Activity came out. Because Paranormal Activity was made here in San Diego. A fellow game designer who became a filmmaker. And so I don't know Oren personally. He was actually another game company.
What was his full name?
His name is Oren Pelly. And so anyway, Oren rented a house for a weekend. He spent $17,000 making Paranormal Activity. Wow. And it made bajillions of money because he made the film. They turned around and he took it to Sundance, or I can't remember where it was, and then I think it was Paramount bought the Paranormal Activity one, and then spent millions of dollars on advertising for that film. But again, it was a film that was made for $17,000, which to a lot of people sounds like a lot of money, but for making something that went into theaters all around the world, that's pretty awesome return on.
Yeah, what was that one with Heath Ledger, the cowboy one? For some reason, my mind just went blank.
Oh, you're talking about Brokeback Mountain?
Yeah, so that one started out as an independent film, and it was selling out, you know, in the local low-budget theaters. And I believe it was because of that sort of this is before YouTube videos and everything going viral. It went viral, basically. And that's when the big distribution company came in and got that film so they could distribute it to the big movie houses and everything. And it won awards and everything like that. So, you know, it's kind of like in that same concept of it really comes down to the story and the skill of people to how they're going to structure a story. And sometimes it's hard to tell what's going to do something like that for you. But because I believe we all have a phone, that gives you the opportunity to at least give it a shot without really losing much.
That is a really good film to bring up, Brokeback Mountain, because one of the things that I noticed people commented on, people that would know that were from ranches in the Midwest and all. I mean, this was a film that was set back in time about 30 years from when it was made, but so I think it was the 60s, and people commented how well the filmmaker captured ranch life. That was something very familiar.
He was Asian too, right?
Isn't that interesting, though? But this is somebody that did their homework, that did their studies. So I love that, you know, that's a good example of how an independent filmmaker still was able to put as much research and thought and care as a full-blown, much higher budget thing. And Neal and I have noticed that with filmmaking, with independent filmmaking, a lot of it, how much attention is put into lighting, sound, things like that, it can really make a huge difference. And I love when we go to events like the Mobile Film Festival, hearing people talk to each other and share information about, apps and information and lenses and, lighting and all these things that they learned the hard way and want to share with someone else. So I enjoy the filmmaking communities in San Diego, and from what I can tell worldwide, are very collaborative. Mm-hmm. There are people that are willing to help, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I really can't say anything. No, I really can't say enough about the marvelous community that we have here in San Diego. We've been really extremely fortunately blessed by people that are here in town because whenever we've worked on almost anything, it's just people have come out of the woodwork and said, we want to be involved and we want to do something. I'll sleep on the floor. I'll do whatever to make a film. I mean, some people that are working, quote unquote, professionals, as if that's, someone who doesn't do something with a mobile phone. Now you're not a professional. But that's sort of ridiculous. But as if the device is what made you professional.
Well, and we can't, it's a real film. It's a real story. Mm-hmm. It's, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have, I waited a few years and I didn't wait. It just happened to be that way because I was looking for the big screen venue. Mm-hmm. to do these and to give people that respect. Otherwise, I just don't think people would have really picked up on it until they got that kind of respect. Right. Otherwise, it would have just continued to be an online video type of a thing.
One of the great joys about sponsoring and attending the film festival was seeing mobile filmmakers some of them were seeing their films on a larger screen for the first time. Yeah. And that's a wonderful thing. And I think getting to see how well their work holds up on large format was a very satisfying thing. That's one of the things I really treasured
and
about
the audience to be able to see, and the not reaction. Just regular people, but their peers, right? Watching their film and their reactions.
Yeah, and for comedies, laughing in the right places, or, for things that were powerful, being moved by them. There was a lot going on there, and that was just wonderful to witness and be part of.
Yeah.
In particular, I really enjoyed kind of watching Narelle.
Yeah.
Because
for our listeners, she won third prize. Yeah. She's the actor.
Yeah, and we really enjoyed kind of watching her film, and we were all the happier whenever we were able to give her an award for her film, and for having traveled from Australia.
And I should mention that Neal and Jana were each separately judging the films as well, with another judge, Penny Stiles. And the one thing that I told you guys was, you hush from each other. Don't talk, don't discuss, don't anything, so that it would be like two completely different people, which it was. You're still individual even though you're married. But yeah, when it was a surprise to you that she took because I didn't tell anybody.
We didn't know. Because we kept our ballots secret from each other and turned them in, and of course we didn't know how the third person was going to be voting at all, and so. It was so whenever some of the people knew that we were judges and they were coming up and asking, sort of trying to get an idea what happened. I said, honestly, we have no idea. Yeah. I don't know how Jana voted. I didn't know how this other person voted, so I don't know how things would fall out. The most I could tell people said, I liked your film. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you how much I liked your film. But anyway, that was wonderful, and I think it was really great to have people coming from so many different places to come and see the film, and I'm just looking forward to next year for us having people from even further afield and different places.
How could you get further than Australia, though? My God, that's
know.
Just a whole different... They're even having winter right now while we're enjoying our 112-degree summer.
Maybe we should go there.
Well, we are invited. One of the things, just to kind of segue into this, because we were talking about storytelling, but there's another form of storytelling as maybe it can be done with a phone. I don't know. Possibly if there's a will, I'm sure there's a way. But there's another sort of storytelling that you guys do with your company, and it's what is it called? Uncharted
Regions.
Yeah, what is that about?
So Uncharted Regions is kind of been a pet project for mine for a really long time. Back whenever I told you before that I'd worked on radio, well, 3 days after I graduated from high school, I went to work with a buddy of mine at a local radio station. And we started messing around with production studio. So we would do a lot of kind of crazy things for weather reports and some other stuff. But as time went by, we decided to get increasingly a little more adventurous. And so we decided one year that we were going to produce a show sort of like the War of the Worlds broadcast that Orson Welles had done. And so we did that for Halloween. We decided to take basically a local legend called the Bulldog Man and turn this into a radio drama, which was called Shadow of the Bulldog Man. So we actually had a really good response to that. And I mean, it was a kind of a tiny radio station, so it wasn't a lot of response, but but we got a nice response to that. And so we decided over the next several years to start producing episodes of the series that we called Uncharted Regions, sort of on and off between 1984 and 89. And so I went off to college, which made things a little more complicated. But anyway, so that project, out of that, I created several scripts for the radio dramas. Those scripts, in turn, got me work in the computer gaming industry. And then, but the radio drama series sort of went dormant for a number of years. So then fast forward to last summer, and Jana and I were at a point where we weren't really in a position that we could make a film. But we're saying, well, what could we do with the resources that we have on hand? And I said, well, we know a lot of actors. And we said, let's actually let's go back and start making some basically revive Uncharted Regions. And so we started off with 2 scripts from the original series that had not been produced. They had been written, but I'd run out of time to have them produced as audio dramas. And so...
But there's this whole so one, if you don't mind, one aspect of an audio drama is that it's all what you hear. So there's no breaking it up with video where you can get away with cheating a little bit with sound, right? Because you can see things. So everything has to be heard. Yeah. And the quality and those tricks, and you do Foley and all that too. What made you feel comfortable enough to do all that? Was that something you had already developed, or?
Well, I wanted to comment that when Neal was doing the sound for our short film, when we did The Case of Evil, I get to hear soundtracks a lot when there's editing going on. And I remember telling him that other than the middle part of the film, other than the setup in the beginning and then the end, a lot of it really would work as an audio play. And so, there's audio is something that, besides the visual is very important too, but Neal's very, very careful as well about audio. And so I was struck by how well that held up. So we had that in mind when we were starting the audio drama series. And I've said this before, but I tease Neal about being his own intern because he's collaborating with his younger self, his late teens to early 20s self. And so, and actually that kid was pretty darn good. So anyway, it's been a fun thing to do, but the audio element was already there. But you're right, some things that you can show visually that film is so good for. And there were so many good examples at the Mobile Film Festival. You have to, we have music, we have sound. It doesn't always have to be dialogue that tells the story. But it also, to me, really heightens, like in one that is still being worked on right now that's almost finished, the different personalities, the way polar opposite people play off against each other and all. That seems, if anything, a little more pronounced because all we have is the sound.
Yeah.
And so someone who's expressive and someone that's a person of fewer words and, less effusive, that it it really seems to highlight that, at least for me.
How do you do that, Neal?
Well, the main thing is that you have to think about sound in the same way a cinematographer does about visuals. And so you say that everything in the story has to be told with sound. Now, that may be a piece of dialogue, that may be a sound effect, that may be just music. And so you have to kind of break it down and think about, how am I going to convey this particular idea, and what's the best way to do that? It starts with you've got to have really solid dialogue. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, the dialogue, the story has to be, and the dialogue has to be there because, you don't see with a regular script, you have the descriptions for what's going on in the scene and everything else, and you say, okay, he walks across the room. Okay, well, in a film, that's easy enough. The actor walks across, and maybe you add some Foley to it to make add some other interest, but that's there. But then you get into really obscure things like, you want to convey the sense of a character turns around to talk to another character. And so you say, how do I convey that? And so I spend some crazy time with Foley where I'm looking for just the right sound effect of how they move their feet.
Like a jacket or something.
Yeah, a jacket or something else like that. And the hard part is playing a balance between, it needs to be enough there that I convey the action, but you don't want to suddenly thrust it into people's face because,
the captivation, you want to keep them captivated in the story and not throw them off. Right?
Yeah, and it becomes distracted if suddenly the code is the loudest thing in the scene.
Right.
And something I wanted to mention is, as far as we're concerned, these are films for the ears. Mm-hmm. And because some people, when we first mentioned we were doing audio dramas, assumed that we were doing the kind of live radio type thing where, I think like Prairie Home Companion does those where there's humorous...
Like in the old days
yes,
type of a thing?
Where they
like
the
crime
old
dramas or something?
But sometimes with those, there's silly sound effects or, things that are... Yeah, or, the coconut shells to be horse, horses clopping by and all. And we have stuck
Neal is over here doing a lot of that right now.
We're using the same kind of sound effects and sound libraries for things that you would for a visual film because we want this to be, even if we're doing something lighthearted, we want the storytelling to be taken seriously, that it's not a spoof of storytelling. It's the real thing.
That's one thing that I definitely can say where I think over the years my approach to sound has changed is because I'm definitely coming at it now from film, and thinking about how would I do the sound for this if it was a film scene,
right?
And so sounds move around in the sound field. People walk and they move left or right across the sound field, and
in a film you can do the natural sound of a room. As a separate track, so you can play with it during your editing. If you're at the train station, you want to go there, you want to record the trains going by and all that before you even start.
Yeah. Well, we film, we tape in a dead room as we can. Of course, we've been really lucky. We've had the first one was taped at KPBS's studios here in town.
And when you say tape, are you actually using tape or are you just recording it into audio files?
All right, fine, okay.
Well, then film wouldn't really be film, would it, these days?
How about capture?
There you go.
But whenever we've been doing captures, again, we have them record in as dead a room as possible. The hard part is that whenever two actors are, we haven't had the luxury yet of a true Disney ISO booth where you've got two people or three people and they're all in completely separate little rooms with a microphone. Right. And so the challenge just becomes to tell people, okay, in reality, the two of you are going to step on each other's lines, right? So because you're getting really excited, you're angry, and so you're going to you kind of step on this other character's lines. I can't have you do that because they're standing next to each other, and so I can't. When I'm editing, I can't adjust either of those things, right. And so you basically have to hold back on it a little bit. Give me half a second or a second of dead air between your takes, so that I can then go back and edit them individually. And so we record, we usually will go through the whole thing 3 times in a recording session. The first one, we basically just let the tape roll. We don't stop. We don't give notes. We just let the whole thing run so that they get warmed up. And so the engineer...
And you figure out the timing.
Well, we figure out the timing, and also so the engineer has an idea of where levels are going to be, but it's really just a warm up, really, for them. Now, occasionally we get something amazing out of that because it's completely fresh. It's the first time they've done it, and so we just kind of sit back and say, okay, we might have something really amazing there. Second time through, we go through and we do it 2 or 3 pages at a time, and it's really focused on, okay, that was great. Once you go back, give me another take on line. Everything's numbered, so give me another take on line, blah, blah, blah. And the third time is a little bit sort of exploratory. We'll go through and say, try a different take on this or what have you.
And that's when we get to say, okay, now you get to fall over 5 different ways or give us several screams like you're in agony or, that's when you're really glad you're in a real studio so the neighbors aren't alarmed.
Yeah, because it does get kind of crazy in that. But then I take home all of these tracks and I turn them into confetti, because I literally take every single take and cut it up into a little chunk, and then I'll go through every one of the takes and say, okay, I like this take versus this take. I like the first half of this take and the last half of this other take, and I do Frankenstein, or what I call Frankenstein takes, where I will chop up all the little different pieces and create the perfect performance of that line.
Right.
Out of all of the different performances I
used to be a media manager, and you know what I'm visualizing right now? I'm visualizing a folder filled with subfolders on your computer, and every one of those has different names in subsequence, and you've got to somehow put a little bit of a description so that you know what you're getting into when you're using each one of them. That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and so every single performance is reduced to a line. Yeah. And then the lines I then manually go in. And the timing every single one of those things I manually create. And so if they need to have someone says something and there's a little bit of a beat, I add that beat manually by spreading the takes apart. Or if I have them overlapping, then I've got to add that overlap.
And another thing that Neal's really careful about that with regular filmmaking is less of an issue. When you are filming people and they're acting opposite each other, there is a natural separation of space. Everybody's standing in specific places, whether it's around a table or one person in a car and one person on the street. And so there's things that need to be done with just sound to make sure you convey that. For example, in one that we're finishing up right now, there's a scene where some people are on horseback and one person is not. And so trying to create the kind of distance between the speakers, that's something you don't think about as much with visual filming, with filming, and except other than how to mic people. And, of course, you're also thinking about how to light them and things like that and making sure everybody's going to have equal quality sound and everything. But that thing of trying to artificially set up where the players are is I think, pretty unique to the audio drama.
Yeah, instead of having sets, we have soundscapes that we have to create. And so whenever there's an opening scene to the episode. The episode that Jana's referring to is one called These Haunted Hills, and it features a scene between Gigi Edgley, who was in Farscape. We were really happy to have her. She was amazing. And Randy Davison, who is sort of, we call our Swiss Army knife, because he's probably the best, if not one of the best voice actors in town. And there's a scene, as she said, that whenever he rides up on horseback, but there's a whole scene of they're on a farm.
How do you get a horse in a studio?
It was difficult. And the hardest part was getting him to drink water. But no, the digital horses, unfortunately, only. But they did a very good job. They were very directable. If you have a horse that's making these particular sounds, is that it isn't necessarily a moment where you've scripted a particular moment where the horse now says, goes, or whatever. But you just go, realistically, it's tired. It's been standing there for a few minutes or something. It's going to make a noise.
Yeah.
And so you find those kind of small, opportune moments to add just a little bit of life and variety to the environment. So that's the real challenge. And
being picky about the sounds that you use, because it's easy to have too many horses when we only needed like 2 or 3. And, it's not it seems like everything was either one horse or a stampede there when we were looking through things. But, and then with sound, we had to convey the same things we would in a regular film of, as Neal mentioned, the setting is a pretty newly terraformed Mars. And so this is an early phase of colonization, so you're painting a world where it's a weird mix of high technology and rather primitive circumstances. So, there's people going around on horseback, but there's also robot-assisted
kind of like the old Star
all.
Wars, like when they go into the bar and stuff like that. That's interesting.
And that's what helps give some character and story to, some context to there, because, you start wondering about things like, well, who would be some of the first people to go up? Would it probably not a whole lot of, probably a lot of people that have unusual things in their lives that would take them there.
That's also part of the storytelling, connecting the viewer with familiar sounds, and I'm thinking about sounds now more than visuals, but with familiar sounds so you don't have to really have to explain that. It's like they'll connect the sound of an animal, say it's a horse, but maybe it's a Martian horse, they still understand that it's some sort of a horse that someone can ride in or something, right?
Well, I think that's probably one of the challenges of doing science fiction. If you're doing science fiction that is not something like the X-Files or something along those lines, but if it's something where it's far future or far enough future that you could have alien animals, and you go, well, the hard part about it is you start getting too exotic with the sound effects. People don't have any context unless somebody says, oh, look, there's a 12-footed... Zargablag.
That happens a lot in films. It can happen a lot with films too sometimes. And actually, when I first started in video production, there was the going round advice of you don't want to be the producer or the editor and the camera person at the same time, because people tend to fall in love with their own B-roll, basically. I didn't have that problem. I just hated everything anyways. No. But that could be a problem with that, where people are, just falling in love with the aesthetics of something, whether it's visual or audio, and it takes away from the story. It's like, let's not forget the story, not just the dialogue, but the whole concept of the story.
Yeah. And, in the same way that the visuals have to in some way serve the story, give me context of place or tell me something about where I am or how a character even may be feeling. I can tell by the frame of the shot. The same thing is true with sound. It needs ultimately to tell me something either about something going on in the story, or at least tell me something about the environment so I have some context for whatever I'm listening to.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole thing of keeping the story moving. That there were some funny lines in this last one that got cut. There's always a few things that get cut. And on the one hand, I can feel bad for our actors because a lot of them count how many lines they have and things like that. But if it's for the good of the overall story, sometimes that has to be done. But something I wanted to mention was that something that I think is one of the biggest compliments we've gotten is when people have heard our audio dramas, they've said, I could see it. I was listening, I could see the movie in my head. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do, is give enough that their brain can fill in the visuals.
Yeah, that's something that we learned in video and film production as well, is like the audio part is very visual. And it takes you a while to go, what? What do you mean the audio is very visual? And yeah.
Well, think of the tense moments in regular film, where sometimes you will hear something like the snap of a twig or a rattle on a door that you're not seeing that, but you're feeling what the person that's, afraid or alarmed or whatever
Hitchcock
is suddenly
was
hearing.
Really
yes.
Good, yes.
Yeah, there's horror movies have a lot of that sort of things where often the actual circumstances, the actual visual setting can be kind of mundane, but then there's a sound that is like stopping someone in their tracks or telling somebody, oh no, this is like way worse than I thought.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the quiet broken by
The
suddenly a little
anticipation.
sound. Yes. There's many ways to create tension, great many ways to manipulate the emotions of people to really put them in the shoes of whoever the protagonist is.
Well, I do definitely think, in talking about the film festival and filmmaking and all that, that audio is something that it's really important. I mean, you can get away with low quality visually, but the sound, people are just not forgiving when it comes to the sound. And it gets to be, for our listeners who are making films with smartphones and things like that, sometimes they forget because they're looking through the screen, right? And they're seeing everything and they're trying to pay attention to, there's apps and all this stuff, but most of them concentrate more on the visual part. And then the audio is killing it, the story.
It's a certain conceit of filmmakers.
Yeah.
And of course, the thing goes, well, it's a visual, storytelling medium. Well, yes, that's true. That's absolutely important.
But it's multimedia.
But it's multimedia, and the reality thing about it is that we connect emotionally more to sound and music than we do to visual things. A visual thing will certainly tell me a story, but the emotional context of a scene will completely change if you change the audio or if you change the sound. I don't know how many times that I have had a scene where it seemed like it was okay. It wasn't necessarily a great scene, but wasn't a bad scene. And then I laid in the right music, and then, oh my God, it completely transforms.
I could almost hear one of our listeners for some reason. Sometimes this happens to me where they're thinking about silent movies. But, in the old silent movies, their acting was more like theater-like. Their expressions were very big, and it's sort of, you can look back on it now and you kind of think it's funny and silly almost, because the emotions are just so grandiose. But it's because the audio is missing.
Yeah, the audio is missing, and so those camera angles were up in your face.
Right.
You're real tight on the eyes, so I can see all that stuff. But yeah, we love silence and everything else too. But
and they used music, and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we think of them being silent, but usually they were performed in a theater with a piano player.
Right.
And so they weren't.
Or an entire symphony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, something that is really good that is most creative people are good problem solvers or learn to be. Mm-hmm. And so it was fun at the Mobile Film Festival hearing people talk about their work, that more than one film, the person that created it said they had to dub the dialogue later because it hadn't come out the way they wanted. And I kind of smiled because with the filmmaking that we've done, you start to learn things. You learned why sound stages were created, especially if you're trying to film outside somewhere or, under circumstances where there's noise. We were trying to do a very simple scene years ago and then didn't realize it was garbage truck day and it wasn't just one pass through. They came for the recycle bins, they came for the yard waste. And so you really start to see where studios came from and things like that. But the things people figure out to do to get around some of these problems and their willingness to share that with others, either in person at a film festival or on the internet through a YouTube-type tutorial. It's really nice to see that kind of workaround stuff being shared because, obviously we're not all Paramount Studios. We don't all have access to vast sound stages and huge crews, but yeah, you start learning a lot about what Foley people do, and
sometimes you just can't even control it. I remember working on a film one time. We did, I can't remember, like 30 takes or something, trying to get somebody who was just walking. They knocked on the door. It was somebody's house, and then they come in. Well, Joe, the leaf blower guy across the street, he was very annoyed with this crew there for like a week. So he decided, you know what, I'm going to get my retribution by, weed whacking and doing the leaf blower. And finally, the actor ad-libbed, and when she opens the door, you hear all that, and she says, "So it's a beautiful day, but there is Joe with the leaf blower, and let's just come inside and, blah, blah, blah." And she just sort of ad-libbed it. And after that, we were like, that's a take. That was exceptional. And, sometimes that's where after you've tried everything technically to get rid of that, the timing, everything, and finally you just go, you know what? We're just going to grab our sense of humor and make the best of it and add them.
Yeah, I did. Whenever we were at the festival, I know that the gentleman who brought Requiem, and I'm blanking on his name right now. I feel bad.
Oh, Brian McLean.
Yeah, Brian. That I think most of
A Killer's Requiem.
A Killer's Requiem. I think most of it was dubbed or whatever.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, what was?
It was just kind of funny though, because it actually reminded me as you go back to a lot of films in the 50s and 60s, and you see how much of those old films. It's one of those things that, as a filmmaker, I'm much more conscious of now, because I go back and I watch, that isn't quite right, or whatever. But you just realize it was all dubbed, and they thought a lot less about it back then. Now we're perfectionists. Now I want the sound in the moment, in the environment.
And we don't even think about it, but you didn't. People can tell just this slight little thing, and they'll get annoyed with it. I've seen films where the syncing isn't right just for a hair, and it's like, oh, it's annoying.
And to this day, often things where people are being filmed in a moving vehicle, the moving background doesn't sync up right for how fast they're supposed to be going or anything, but that drives us a little nuts.
Or you're looking at the window, they forgot to put the actual image there. They used, and it's all, I think I saw that on Transformers, and I'm going, that's a multi-billion-dollar film. They couldn't have put something in the background of that, You can see it throughout, except this one short little scene. And you're going, it's all white in the windows. What happened? When you saw the green hills in the background throughout the whole thing.
It was a glary day. I don't know.
Right, yeah. So what is the, this thing that you have going? Now, for our listeners, we're going to do our mobile filmmaking panel at Comic-Con. Yay. And then we've also, because of this particular podcast, I thought I'd have to explain this, but we are doing the podcast now, so that's a good. We're also invited to Neal and Jana's panel as well.
Yeah, we've got 2 separate panels this year. The first one is on Thursday at 1:00 in the library. It's starting to sound like Clue.
I was going to say the mustard guy with the candle holders.
But it's Thursday at 1 in the Neil Morgan Auditorium of the library. And we're going to bring on various friends of ours who do different kinds of podcasts. And so the main thrust of it is called Heroes at the Mic. And the main thrust of it is people talk about the ins and outs of making their podcasts. What are their challenges? How do they find their audiences? And just kind of talk about their experiences in running podcasts, because there's a lot of people that are interested in the topic. And some people think it's something really arcane and they need to understand all this other stuff.
If I'm doing it, hey.
We're just going to go through and talk to people about what are your experiences running podcasts and what advice do you have and that sort of thing. And so thank you for graciously agreeing to be on our panel.
You may not want me there now.
No, we will be very happy to have you there. And then on Friday, we are sharing our most recent episode of Uncharted Regions. Again, that one is going to be Friday in the same place, in the Neil Morgan Auditorium of the library. So 3:00. The great thing about it is we're going to play the entire episode. These episodes of the show run 30 minutes long-ish. And then following the episode, we're going to have a panel with myself and with Jana, but also with our lead star, Gigi Edgley. So again, if you're a fan of Farscape or like geeky stuff in general, she's amazing. So you can come and talk to her. But we have also got Randy Davison, and we've got Tamara Alsaied, who was our young star as well. So we had, and she was, we met her end of last year, and she was in a local production of Into the Woods. She played Riding Red, and she was amazing. And so we're really happy to have her.
Yeah, she's wonderful. That production of Into the Woods was very good, and the character that she's playing is 13, 14 years old, and that's the age she's at. And so it was nice to have an age appropriate person in that role. Everyone's very good, all of our performers in that. And I wanted to mention for people that are out of the area, a lot of areas have a Comic-Con, but we're talking about the Comic-Con, Comic-Con International, that's based here in San Diego. And we've been to some of the other Comic-Cons. They're great fun. I don't mean to put down other Comic-Cons. I just wanted to differentiate. Ours, the one that has just an unbelievable number of people.
170,000 people for 5 days.
Oh, that's why I couldn't get from.
Yes. So big that they're shutting down the street in front of the convention center this year.
Yeah, they're actually taking over downtown.
Yeah. And well, they pretty much have for years, but
Yeah.
at least finally they're kind of actually helping address the traffic problem. But I also wanted to also mention there we had there's 5 other actors in this production, but 3 others that were involved as well, and I want to kind of shout out to them. There's Joe Paulson, who is a local actor. He's also done some stuff for the Old Globe. We're really happy to have him involved. One of our actresses was actually the one that we spent the most time looking for, because we were looking for an Australian little girl. We thought, Southern California, we ought to be able to find a little Australian actress, and eventually we had to go across the pond and have it recorded remotely. There was a young lady there was a woman that was a professional sound person, and she had a daughter that did the part for us, and she banked it out of the ballpark. She did an amazing job. But her name is Mary Grace Gregg. And then, of course, we had Larry Nemecek, who is a friend of ours, who's best known to people who are into Star Trek, because he was the editor for Star Trek magazine for a number of years. And he was also in the fan films of Star Trek Continues. And so if you liked Bones in Star Trek Continues, he played the Doctor in 2 of the episodes of Star Trek Continues. And then, of course, Jana and I also have bit parts in it. So Jana plays the part of the computer, and I'm a robot. So
can we get a little bit of a sample of the computer?
Well, in both cases, they were manipulated digitally to sound a little more that. But I just sort of follow the ideal of, like in Logan's Run, just sort of the calm and not particularly up and down with emotions voice. So, it's like, there was a wanted murderer in the front yard, that sort of thing, where there just isn't, it's declarative.
We're going to tear your eyes out.
Yes, death is imminent, it is, and that's actually a little bit too up. But anyway, just calm, steady, whatever you have to say. So that's what I did with that. But it was really fun being in the sound booth with the other performers, and we had so much fun at that recording
I can
session.
only just imagine how much fun you guys have doing it. And you're going to be doing this in your at the panel?
Yeah, we'll present the episode
right there live.
Well, no, we're not doing it live.
No, okay.
No, we're playing back the recorded, produced episode.
Okay.
No, we're not doing old-timey radio. People have actually... The one thing that's actually kind of fun is that our first episode, Someday Over You, even whenever we were doing it, the one thing that we kept on talking about is that, this would actually work as a stage play. And so maybe farther down the road...
one-act play type thing.
Kind of a one-act play. And so we actually started talking about, maybe when we're done with all this other stuff, this might be kind of fun to go back and stage as a one-act play. And so we'd love to do it. The only main thing is we have to get one of the actresses who was in that one from San Francisco, because she lives in San Francisco. But yeah, we're like I said, we're going to have play the episode. Then shortly thereafter, we'll have a Q&A with the cast. And so we would love people to come and listen to the show, get a chance to meet Gigi, and ask questions.
This is amazing. So our mobile filmmaking workshop thing is also on Friday the 20th, but it's from 1 to 2.
Yes, so just hang out for an hour.
Yeah.
After that, and then we'll be on at 3.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool on the timing. So it's all about us at Comic-Con on Friday. Just want to make sure everybody understands.
Well, also the Neil Morgan Library is where ours are. Where is yours located?
Ours is over at the Sheraton. What is it? The Marriott or whatever.
She's in the real rooms.
In the
No, she's over by the convention center, but not. Well, anyway, that would give people sufficient time to get from one
definitely.
panel to the other because we're a few.
She just walks across the bridge.
Yeah, you have to go over the bridge towards the library, which is in San Diego. You can't miss it. It looks like a big silver Easter egg.
Yeah. Of course, if you're really dedicated, I mean, really, really dedicated, you come to our panel with Susie on Thursday. And then just stay there for 26 hours.
Bring your tent.
Bring your tent and camp out because you want to be one of the first people to hear these haunted hills from Uncharted Regions.
That's pretty cool, though. And by the way, while you're crossing that bridge, look for the zombies.
You always look for the zombies. And the dinosaurs.
I never dress up as anything. I used to dress up as things a lot, like just sporadically when I was a kid, but I haven't done that.
You just dress as a mobile filmmaker.
Yeah, usually what happens is I get compliments, I love your cosplay. I'm like, oh, thank you. I'm like, what did I do? Because I'm not wearing a cosplay.
I don't anymore. Primary from a practical point is that usually Comic-Con is in the 90s, and I don't like melting now that I'm old, and so I'm not that dedicated to my art.
I could see you doing the steampunk because you have some pretty interesting. I've seen pictures of you wearing really interesting coats and.
I could do steampunk. I like it, though. I'm kind of a purist is the fact that some of the steampunk stuff actually goes a little far for me. He said, I just want to do straight up Victorian, you know, because, actual Victorian kind of stuff. And so sometimes it's like, why are you wearing gears in those locations? It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, I whenever I was younger, and particularly when I was a kid, the first ever convention I went to, I was in '79. And I was a little tiny, chunky Darth Vader. Aww. And I have a picture from that. And so that was my first ever cosplay.
Now, is that something we can post on the...
I have a picture. I'll share it with you if you want to see it. So you can share.
Let's share with all our listeners.
My little Darth Vader costume.
Do you do the Darth Vader voice? Yeah, do that.
I know, that's about it. Otherwise, I've got this little Mickey Mouse voice that just doesn't work. Come to the dark side. We have better cookies. I don't know.
Well, sometimes, I don't wear costumes at Comic-Con, but some years if I've just come in, what I thought was a nice summer outfit or whatever, I've had people come up and say, oh, who are you being? And it's like, these are just my clothes.
I dress this way every day because I'm a freak. Thank you very much.
Or just fashionable.
We're doing perfect with time.
Okay, great.
So when we do our notes, I want to share some links of your website.
Okay.
Are there shows also that they can?
We are not, because we're hoping ultimately for the show to be aired on broadcast. And so what we're doing right now is we're taking individual episodes to different conventions. And so whenever we have the full run of 13, then our hope is either to get onto either PBS/NPR and have them broadcast over the air, or failing that, or additionally to that, or what have you, making them available on something like iTunes, Audible, and that sort of thing. But because I kind of discovered radio drama in the 80s, and I was listening to, it's kind of a golden age for radio drama because Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy came out then. Lord of the Rings radio drama came out back then.
Really? Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. And so, but there was a series that was actually kind of a guiding star from whenever we did the first edition of Uncharted Regions called Bradbury 13, which of course was based on the works of Ray Bradbury, and was wonderful. And I still have those tapes, and incredible series, and that was really a huge influence on.
There's a lot of podcasts that are like, kind of like what you guys are doing too. Right. Have you guys ever thought about doing a series like? I don't know how they're able to pull these out because they do them once a week.
Yeah, that's the thing for us, is that we are really we are hyper produced.
Yeah.
Because we approach these, like, as you said, like it's a motion picture every
Yeah,
episode.
you can't do that once a week.
And
I
we
mean,
can't do
it's just-
that. I mean, and also too is that we don't want to run into the thing as we're on the air because we're on the air.
I don't want to say you can't. I apologize for that.
But
because I mean, there's
but
always,
there's a
but
level of
still.
quality that's really.
Yeah.
I would rather put out 13 episodes that are very polished and very well done and worth people's time
Right.
tuning in for than I'm on and they're going, oh my God, this is a rehash of episode 327 and whatever, they're stuck in the cave again and I don't know what's going on. And but in addition to all this other stuff, I'm also writing the music for the series.
Right.
And so that takes a lot of time.
Plus,
and
you're sponsoring our film festival.
and we have a life.
Yeah.
We have other things that we have to do.
And you're
so,
involved with the filmmaking,
yeah.
community
And
here too.
So, our goal is to basically we treat it like a season. So we're going to do the first 13. Everything goes well. Everybody likes it. Great. We'll come back. We'll do season 2.
Well, we have a community that we just sort of launched because you were talking about the mobile filmmakers and how wonderful it was to meet them and stuff like that and stuff like that. And one of the things that I was told in previous years as well is like there's this community that's evolving they only knew of my film festivals. Your film festival is creating this community.
So they started off as tadpoles.
Yeah, right. And so they were like, I started noticing there were people that were, like this year, right? There was Norrell and Norrell Nash, Brian Hennings. Brian Hennings came last year as well. He's from Perth in Australia. Norrell is closer to Sydney. And so was Jason Van Genderen, who came to do that special presentation with Filmbreaker. And it was really interesting when all three of them had never met before. And all three of them, I know, Australia is a huge place, but for all three of them to come to our film festival in San Diego to meet.
And see, we have a tie into that because the lead character in Uncharted Regions is Australian.
Yeah, well, okay. So, and then Brian Hennings and Ari, they were... So Brian Hennings, after our film festival, was at the Toronto Smartphone Film Festival in Canada. And I was talking to Aris Tyros, who was in last year's film festival, who's Canadian. And turns out that they met and they had a coffee or something together, and while they were there, so they were able to meet up. But they met the first time in our film festival last year. And so I guess what I'm trying to get to is like there is a community, like a family almost, that's been happening, over the years. And so when I first launched this in 2009, there wasn't that at the time yet. There weren't, from what I hear, our film festival was the first one that actually had a live venue for people to actually meet in person. But it was starting to form into a network sort of a thing, into a community, but mostly online. And some of them would meet online, and then they would meet in a physical film festival after that. So there's this growing community. So what I wanted to do here in San Diego was to connect the San Diego wonderful community here of filmmakers and video people and artists in general, audio, also visual, whatever, into this other global community, all sharing by making videos with their phones and films, of course, and then connecting in the film festival and getting, becoming international filmmakers. And so one of the things that we have a contest going on right now. So it's called, it's a hashtag, Mobilize Stories, right? And then we have on social media, Mobilize Stories, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you use the hashtag, then I like to retweet or share or whatever just to show support. And I want all of them to sort of do that with each other when they see that hashtag. And one way to do that also is to help keep the ball rolling throughout the year was the contests. And so you were talking about Jana was talking about how it's not just, this film festival in San Diego. There are, not film festival, comic convention. There's comic conventions all over the world. And so the first contest, because we just launched this for July, is about comic conventions. So can you give our listeners just a little bit of an understanding of how they can take video clips they've shot with their phones and maybe create little videos and submit them into that contest?
I'll try. And so the main thing is that if you go to a convention, you're going to have lots of opportunities to shoot all kinds of cool stuff. Because if you've never been to one of these conventions, number one, obviously the obvious thing is that there are going to be a lot of people in cosplay. Mm-hmm. And so wearing costumes, and so they may be steampunk, they may want Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever, your fandom you're into, you're going to find people there who are in these costumes. And so a lot of these people are wannabe theater people. They like acting out and doing little scenes and stuff. And so you could get them to get together and kind of quickly script something out and have them act out a scene from something like that. But the other thing, too, is maybe you're more of a documentary bent kind of person. And the great thing about it is you have fans from all over the world, but even better, you have creators from all over the world. And so this is something that Jane and I have done in the past, is that we hunted down various people who worked on different shows or on comic books or whatever. And you'll find that most of these creators, short of being like the big, super gigantic television star kind of people or whatever, right, most of them you can walk up to them and say, hey, whatever, can I take 5 or 10 minutes of your time and let's talk about, whatever.
Yeah. And
the beautiful thing is you have your camera. It's right there. You have the phone and you can capture some footage and have them answer a few questions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Susie has some recommendations about, getting the sound and everything else taken care of, because there are all kinds of little devices and stuff that you can work with.
There's something, because when you're going to Comic-Con, you really want to go light, mm-hmm, because there's a lot of walking and things like that. And I usually tell people, you can't see these, you guys, but I have my earpods or whatever you call these, my earbuds from my iPhone. Well, they have a microphone because that's what you use to have a conversation with someone on the phone. You could just plug this in and hand them, the microphone part and say, just talk into that. And that way you've got a microphone. Or you can use an iRig and a conventional microphone with an XLR cable or wireless or however you want to do that. But I'm just trying to say for people to stay light, to do something like that. And you can ask people questions and they can go on, but you can do what you guys do and cut them up.
You've got a little gadget right here that you can do the sound with really well.
Yeah, exactly.
She's got a Zoom HN1 or H4n.
Right.
There's just, like Neal said, there's just so many opportunities for creativity with whatever Comic-Con you can get to. Even just something like the array of people in costumes lining up to get coffee, or, you could go into, at our Comic-Con, we have an artist's alley where you could go up and ask people about what their comic is, or tell us about your art. You could do the same things with book authors doing signings. So there's a lot of stuff you could do that's the non-fiction type stuff, but there's also just so much opportunity for fun, like where else are you going to see, like 100 Harley Quinns all together, or, 24 Princess Leia's as the dancing slave girl. And so there's just a lot of things you could do, just treat it like kind of like you would a travelogue, or you could treat it as, kind of a spontaneous little story you could do. And as Neal was saying, a lot of people would be willing to participate, but just use your imagination and see what you can do for a short film.
Your road trip to Comic-Con.
Or even just the play of people who are in your hotel lobby, some of them in costumes and some of them with nothing to do with Comic-Con, that don't know what is happening and why all these people in weird costumes are around. So there's so much room for fun.
Yeah, and for listeners, for some of you who maybe you can't go to a comic convention, you can do a narrative, film about your dream to go to one, say, just as an example, as long as the topic is about a comic convention, where you could be, I'm trying to get the tickets and I'm not getting the tickets, and maybe you could do your own cosplay and pretend. Or if you don't have a badge but you have a Comic-Con in your town, you can go outside and say, there it is, and form a story around that, just as long as it's in that theme. Because, it just dawns on me, some people may not be the lucky ones like I used to be to get a badge. It's like you have to know. It's almost like you have to go to Hollywood to get into Comic-Con right now.
It's really getting more and more difficult, and the one here is so popular. It's getting more and more difficult. Yeah, have your friends that can go, or your social media acquaintances Skype in and capture what they have to say. That way you could get, feeds from all different parts of a convention. There's a lot you can do even if you can't physically be there.
And vloggers. I mean, you just mentioned that, and I remember the first Comic-Con that I went to in 2016, where there were people vlogging, and they had all the equipment like filmmakers. And they were walking around just talking and vlogging about, they were like hosting the Comic-Con thing, kind of like Entertainment Tonight or something like that, but they were YouTube personalities. And even they could enter this. I just think that it's a really neat experience for people to go to an event like this, because you don't have to be a geek. I'm not that savvy, I hate to say it like that, but you have to be a geek savvy person to really get into it. But I can tell you right now from my experience, no, you don't, because it's so enjoyable. And I'll tell you, my experience at Comic-Con from the first year on, it's almost like when you go to a rock concert or a concert or something like that, and you're talking to people, you're all like brothers and sisters, you're all one. There's a connection. There's a mutual connection there.
It's definitely a community, and that the one great thing about a Comic-Con is that a lot of us, not all the room, not everyone, but a lot of us were people that were not necessarily, weren't necessarily the popular people when we were going around or whatever. We might have been the one that got bullied or beat up or what have you. But Comic-Con's kind of a safe place, is the fact that, I hear the things that I love. And the great thing about it is no one's going to look at you sideways because you like Doctor Who, or you like this comic book, or you like this television show. This is the one place on earth where you're safe. And they go, these other people love this stuff too, and they all share their passion, their enjoyment, and so I love it. It's a really energetic thing for 5 days. You're just walking around, and you go, these are my people, these are my tribe.
Exactly. So I'm gonna play. That's a perfect segue to go into this little game. We always do a little game, and our listeners who listen to more than one of these, they know. They're like, when are you gonna put them on the spot and play this game? Okay. It's 20 seconds.
All right.
So I'm gonna give you both, so you have to get close.
Okay.
And
do you have a buzzer?
Yes, I do, actually. Wait till you hear this, but it'll come on and give you that ending.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. You're getting close to it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would like for you guys to do is to throw off some Comic-Con recurring panels that you know of that people should go to. Your eyes just widened up like, what?
Yikes.
Okay. So are you guys ready?
20 seconds?
Yeah. So you both can butt in. You just chime in, okay?
For people who are interested, there are always things about how to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start, and just you've only got 20 seconds, so you'll just want to kind of name them.
Okay. All right.
And then maybe we can form a list for the notes, just so that people will go, "What the hell was that?" So you guys ready? Get set and go.
There are workshops on how to break into comics, either as a writer or especially as a visual artist.
There's the Black panel, which offers a lot of people who are comic writers or television people.
There's always stuff about Star Trek, including Larry Nemecek's panel.
Yeah, and whenever we're doing the writing for the computer gaming industry panel.
Yeah, those 20 seconds go by fast.
Yeah, they do.
Did I scare you with the...
No, we're good.
I saw you jump. Don't pretend. Even I jumped. So is there anything else that you'd like to bring up? I know there's a lot of people involved in your thing you might want to name.
So, but yeah, like I said, there are going to be 13 episodes in the original, the season 1. And so in addition to, Jana and I are both writing episodes for this, but in addition to that, we have Harris Orkin, who is already, we've already produced an episode that he wrote for us called Trail of Fears. That's kind of a Western, but in a very traditional kind of Old West kind of thing, but with a twist, because everything in this series has a twist. But in addition to that, we have a couple of friends of ours, Allison Winter and Aaron Knowles, who are writing episodes for us. We have Hannibal Taboo, who is an amazing comic book writer, and he's written something for us. If you are familiar with the old computer game not Fallout, Half-Life, we have the writer from Half-Life, Mark Laidlaw, who's going to write an episode for us. And probably my favorite person, who's just actually a really close buddy of ours that we've known for a long time, is Jeffrey Thorne. And Jeffrey Thorne is the showrunner for the animated Black Panther series.
Oh, wow.
From Marvel. And so having him in our writings room, we're really proud of.
And we made friends with him at Comic-Con years ago. He's done everything from comic books to Star Trek novel work and television work. He's amazing, and we really have great respect for the guy.
Yeah, he started off, he'd won a contest writing a short story for a contest for people who are interested in Star Trek, and he wrote a short story for them, and then he did a Star Trek novelization, and he kept on going. So he was a producer on The Librarians, on Leverage, and so now, like I say, he's worked his way up to showrunner on this particular animated thing. So really looking forward to seeing Jeff's story.
There's also a script that's inspired by stories of his own childhood by our good friend Jimmy Diggs. He's really busy. He's doing his own writing projects and all, and so probably Neal and I will do a lot of writing on that, but he will collaborate because it needs to have the right flavor and everything, but that's going to be a lot of fun. I have 2 stories I want to do, so whichever one we do first will be whatever I finish first. But and then we'll I'm sure collaborate on some other stuff.
But that's sort of our writing stable of stuff. I also want to say, shout out a couple of thank yous to various people who've basically kind of helped us along so far. Number one, again, Harris Orkin, who, like I said, had done a Trail of Fears. We've recorded our last episode, or the episode that we did with Gigi, we recorded up there. It's looking like we will probably record our next episode up there as well. There's also Chelsea Scott and Matt Alcobia, who allowed us to do some recording up at the Escondido area. And so we really appreciate them letting us come into their recording space up there and do some recording.
And Escondido is a place in San Diego County going north.
Yes, it's about 60 miles, 50 miles north of
Escondido
or Escondido.
Yeah, Escondido is inland. And then also we've had tremendous help and support and sponsorship from our friends Ben and Keith who do the Two Gay Geeks podcast. The great guys, good friends, and they've been very supportive of our creative endeavors.
I met one of them last year.
Yeah. There's Ben and Keith, and so I introduced you to, I think, Keith. And so they still want to actually have you on their show sometime if you can work out the schedule.
Well, there you go. Call me Keith.
And then, also, and last but not least, I want to thank Gene Turnbow of Krypton Radio. Because Gene and his wife Susan have been gigantic supporters of ours, and last Halloween they actually ran our premiere episode 4 times on Halloween.
Yeah, I got to.
And so really big thank you to Gene. Gene has been chomping the bits. He wants to be first run for Uncharted Regions, and so we talk about. So that's not entirely out of the cards. We'll see how things are going to fall out or whatever. But we love them to death, and it's if you are into geeky things. Check out Krypton Radio because they play music. They have several different podcasts that they carry on their network.
Including now the Two Gay Geeks.
Yes, the Two Gay Geeks are on their network now. And so if you like geeky things, Krypton Radio is the place to go. And so I will push their tagline, which is it's Wi-Fi for your or sci-fi for your Wi-Fi.
Oh, that's cool.
And we also owe, for getting us started, we owe thanks to Miguel Rodriguez, of the
Yes,
Horrible Imaginings
yes.
Film Festival, and Beth Accomando, who is the local arts reporter for the PBS affiliate here.
And KPBS, and also our engineer, Don Johnson. You know, I asked him if he was going to
From
wear
Miami Vice?
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, "Are you going to show up in the white shirt and the white coat?" But he was the engineer for our first episode to get us recorded, and we have a really big thanks to KPBS, Miguel Rodriguez, because he had our first debut of the first episode was at Horrible Imaginings Film Festival, which was crazy because we actually opened a film festival.
And I think that's where we met, because we played one of Conrad Mess's movies, which was about zombies. It was a 1-minute film, and we played it in at the Media Arts Center on their big screen. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where, because...
Well, we've definitely been, of course, we are mutual friends with Pia.
Yeah,
Pia,
well, that's where we met after.
Yes,
but
yes.
we... Pia and J.R. Thrasher
Right, our other
are also sponsors, right? And we met at Pia's birthday at a restaurant, and we
Yes.
kept going, where have we seen each other before? And it was a few years ago at there, and that's when we finally, I mean, it took a while. You know, I'm sure our listeners can relate to that when you see somebody, you're going, where, and you casually just go, must have been from another lifetime.
Well, and that's just another aspect of the San Diego filmmaking community. It is very tight here.
Yeah.
And you think it is as large a city as San Diego would be, you wouldn't necessarily know everything, but pretty much it seems like if I don't know somebody in the filmmaking community here, I at least know someone who knows that person. It's very tight, amazing group of people, and again, love them all to death. And we've been very, very pleased that even though we're an audio drama, that they let us play on their forums and they don't yell at us for not being video. But again, we've done video projects.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've done that too. So is that it for you?
Well, yeah, that's it. That's all we have to say in the entire universe. That's it. That's the total finality of it. But no. But anyway, so I would, if I can go ahead and snake some PR here. So if you would like to find out more about Uncharted Regions, you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter, but we are Uncharted Region, singular, because there wasn't enough room for an S. So there's only one Uncharted Region on Twitter. But you can find us there. And then also we have our official website, unchartedregions.com. You can check us out, find out more about the stuff we've done. It's kind of out of date. We're going to catch up on it, but we've actually been busy making episodes, so hoping we'll get back there and get up to date or whatever. But you can find out more about us and the stuff we're working on. And then, of course, Jana and I we're both on Twitter and on Facebook individually. Jana has a blog. I do as well. So I'm just nealhallford.com. She's janahallford.com. And so obviously if you have any questions or you have questions or comments or what have you, feel free to throw those out to us. And do you have any closing comment or
No, just that we really appreciate being on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Yes, that was awesome. Thank you so much for bringing us.
Oh, it's always a fun time with both of you. Also, they're on our website. The Swords and Circuitry, anyways, is on our website.
The Swords and Circuitry Studios, which is the blanket production studio. So,
right.
Uncharted Regions is a production of Swords and Circuitry Studios. So that's
that's like mine with Espotello Productions is the parent of everything.
I guess one last parting shot is that we're looking forward to seeing everybody at the next International Mobile Film Festival.
Definitely, right?
And looking forward to seeing your films. And
it's not too soon to have started if you haven't already.
Yeah, get started now.
Yeah.
Getting your submissions ready.
So what's the deadline?
Right.
What's the deadline for the next festival?
Yeah, because they're running the submissions. The gates have been opened.
Oh, they have.
Yeah. The deadline is November 19th for the short films and October 19th for those feature-length 40 to 90-minute mobile films.
Okay, we'll see. So you're going to have to get cracking on all that stuff. And so we're going to make a feature film about both of us dying trying to get this series.
It's going to be a feature or a short film?
It's going to be a feature. It's a long,
Long death?
Long death. No, anyway, but no. But like I said, we're looking forward to seeing all the films, seeing all the filmmakers at whatever. Whip those phones out, get shooting, and make some magic happen.
Awesome. And you guys, when you do something mobile filmish, don't forget to use the hashtag Mobilize Stories, and I'll share it even with these guys.
Yeah, we want to see it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.